She handed me an invoice like I was the vendor, I said, my voice so steady the room seemed to hold its breath. It was my daughter's bridal shower, soft pink streamers, the clink of glasses, the warm perfume of lilies and vanilla cupcakes. Sunlight cut through the lace curtains and painted gold on the tablecloth. I remember the sound of a fork dropping a tiny bright metallic note that felt like a bell. She stood there, cheeks flushed with excitement, and slid the paper across to me. The handwriting was hers, neat and cold. "Mom, this is for your portion of the wedding," she said, as if I'd mislaid my manners rather than my dignity. Laughter rippled in the room, polite and thin. My chest felt like a locked room where the air had been quietly pumped out. People looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I tasted the sugar of the cake and something metallic under it. Anger, yes, but something else. A plan forming, slow and deliberate. I smiled, and then I asked the question no one expected, I suppose. "Before you judge my daughter too harshly, you should know the path that led us here. Families don't unravel in one day. No, the threads weaken slowly, and sometimes we don't notice until the fabric tears right in front of us. My name is Eleanor. I'm 67 years old, a widow, a mother, and until that bridal shower, a woman who believed she had raised her children to know the value of respect, love, and gratitude. I grew up poor, the daughter of a coal miner in western Pennsylvania. My father's hands were always blackened, his knuckles raw. My mother scrubbed clothes until her skin cracked. When I married my late husband Daniel, I swore I would give my children a life better than mine, and for years, I thought I had succeeded. Daniel was a steady man. He worked at the steel plant until his back gave out. Then he worked behind a desk, filing reports and watching younger men take over his shifts. He wasn't perfect, no husband is, but he loved his children, and he adored me. Together we saved every penny. We sacrificed vacations, new cars, even small luxuries. Not for ourselves, but for our children we had to. Olivia and James. James, my firstborn, was always the quiet one, bookish, thoughtful. He loved history and would sit at the kitchen table, rattling off facts about battles and kings while I kneaded bread. He went on to become a teacher. He doesn't earn much, but he lives honestly. And every time I hear him speak about his students, I know he inherited the best part of me, the part that believes life is more than money. And then there's Olivia, my beautiful, fiery Olivia. From the moment she was born, she commanded attention. I remember her cry, sharp, insistent. Even as a toddler she wanted more toys, more sweets, more of my time. Where James was content with a quiet story, Olivia wanted a stage. As she grew, so did her appetite for being admired. She was the girl in school plays, the cheerleader, the one who needed the perfect shoes. I gave in too often, I'll admit that now. When Daniel passed, I softened even more. I told myself, she only has one parent now. Don't let her feel deprived. Maybe that was my mistake. By the time Olivia met Jonathan, her fiancé, she was working at a marketing firm, living in a sleek apartment, always posting photos of dinners and trips I knew she couldn't quite afford. She wanted a lifestyle that sparkled, even if it drained her. Jonathan, well, he comes from money. His parents live in a gated community, the kind with golf courses and imported wine cellars. They look at me politely but never warmly, as if my sensible shoes and careful savings were foreign objects. When Olivia got engaged, she slipped easily into their world, like a puzzle piece snapping into place. The wedding, of course, became a production, not a union of two souls, but a performance. A ballroom, not a church. A 12-piece band instead of a DJ. And Olivia wanted it all lace imported from Italy, a cake so tall it might scrape the ceiling, flowers by the truckload. At first, I thought she was simply caught up in excitement, but then came the phone calls, the spreadsheets, the constant talk of who would pay for what. "Mom," she'd say, her voice tight, "it's tradition. The bride's family covers most of the wedding." I reminded her gently that I wasn't a woman of endless means. I had savings, yes, but they were meant for my retirement, for medical needs, for the quiet years when I might not be able to work in my garden or climb the stairs without help. "Still," she pressed, "it's just one day. Don't you want me to have the wedding of my dreams?" I wanted to say, "One day. It's your life I care about, Olivia, not chandeliers and monogrammed napkins." But instead, I bit my tongue. I offered what I could, a generous but reasonable sum, enough for a lovely ceremony, not a royal coronation. She didn't thank me. She only said, "We'll see." Meanwhile, James watched quietly. He never interfered, though once he did take me aside. "Mom," he said softly, "don't let her drain you. Olivia doesn't always realize what she's asking." His words lingered in my mind, but still, I hoped. I hoped she'd remember the nights I stayed up sewing costumes for her plays, the mornings I braided her hair, the years I spent making sure she never went without. But instead of gratitude, Olivia brought me to that bridal shower, where every ribbon, every champagne glass, every smiling guest seemed like a stage set for humiliation. And it was there, in that room smelling of roses and vanilla, that she handed me a bill as if I were her accountant rather than her mother. I should have torn it in half. I should have stood up and left, but instead, I smiled because in that exact moment, something inside me clicked into place, and Olivia had no idea that her little invoice had set something much larger in motion. She thought she was in control that day, but she didn't realize she'd just given me the perfect opening to rewrite the story of her wedding and her future. The paper she handed me was no ordinary invoice. It was typed, formatted, itemized like something you'd receive from a contractor. I remember the columns neatly lined, the bold black font at the top, mother's contribution balance. There were numbers, big ones. $4,500 for the dress, $7,200 for the venue deposit, $3,800 for flowers, $2,600 for catering tastings, and at the bottom, circled in thick red ink, was the total, $18,750, $18,750. It was almost half of my life savings. I read it twice, thinking surely it must be a joke, but when I looked up, Olivia was smiling, not kindly, but with the smug satisfaction of a banker closing a deal. Her friends leaned in, whispering behind their manicured nails. One even laughed softly, as though my shock were entertainment. "Olivia," I said, keeping my voice level, "what is this supposed to mean?" She shrugged. "It's just easier this way, Mom. Jonathan's parents are covering the rehearsal dinner and the honeymoon. I'm covering photography and my bridesmaids. So, this is your share." I divided it up to make it fair. My throat tightened. "You're asking me to pay for nearly $20,000 worth of decorations and food." Her expression hardened. "You always told me you wanted me to have a beautiful wedding. This is beautiful. Do you want me to walk down the aisle in a cheap dress, in some community hall?" I opened my mouth, but words stumbled. My cheeks burned. Guests were watching, her friends, Jonathan's relatives, even my sister, Margaret, who gave me a pitying glance. It wasn't just the money. It was the way she stripped me of dignity, turning a sacred moment into a transaction. James wasn't at the shower, but I could hear his voice in my mind. "Don't let her drain you, Mom." Olivia tapped her perfectly polished nail on the total. "It's not like you can't afford it. You've been saving for years, right?" Ah, there it was. The assumption that my sacrifice existed only to fund her dreams. I remembered the nights after Daniel died, when I clipped coupons and turned down the thermostat just to stretch every dollar. I remembered mending the same coat winter after winter. Those savings were not hers. They were mine. Safety, security, peace. I wanted to scream. "I gave you life, Olivia. I gave you everything. And now you give me a bill." But instead, I forced a smile. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "I'll look it over." The relief on her face was immediate. She believed she had one. She believed I would fold, like I always had. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The betrayal wasn't just the invoice. It was years of entitlement, years of taking without giving, years of never once seeing me as a person, only as a provider. I sat there, the paper trembling lightly in my hands, while the laughter and chatter of the bridal shower swirled around me. The clinking glasses, the rustle of tissue paper as gifts were unwrapped, the faint hum of a love song playing through hidden speakers. All of it felt far away. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the usual way. I was cold almost, because I realized something, that Olivia had drawn a line in the sand. She had chosen money over respect, and if that was the battlefield she wanted, then I would meet her there, but not as the victim. As the strategist, she thought that invoice was just paper, but to me it was proof. Proof of her greed, proof of her disrespect, and proof that it was finally time to teach my daughter a lesson she would never forget. That night, when the house was quiet and the remnants of the bridal shower still lingered, the faint perfume of lilies, the half-eaten cupcakes wrapped in cling film on the counter, I sat at the kitchen table with Olivia's invoice in front of me. The numbers stared back like cold, unblinking eyes. $18,750. It wasn't just a demand. It was a declaration. "You exist to serve me. Your sacrifices are mine to claim." I folded the paper neatly, slid it into an envelope, and tucked it into my desk drawer. I knew then that I wouldn't simply ignore it. No, I would respond. But my answer would not come in anger or raised voices. My answer would be patient, deliberate, and unforgettable. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a battlefield of quiet tension. Olivia called often, her tone sharp and transactional. "Did you look over the invoice yet, Mom?" she'd asked, her voice sugar-coated when Jonathan was within earshot. "I'm working on it," I'd reply calmly. "Working on it." She'd snap when she thought no one was listening. "It's not complicated. Just transfer the money. Jonathan's parents already paid their part. Don't embarrass me. Embarrass her." That was what she feared most, not poverty, not struggle, but losing face. I let her believe I was hesitating because of logistics. I nodded when she complained, reassured her with vague promises, and played the role of the dithering mother. Inside, though, I was building something far stronger than a checkbook. I began making quiet visits. First, to my attorney. Mr. Whitman had been my lawyer for over 30 years, handling our mortgage, Daniel's will, even the deed to my small home. He raised his eyebrows when I laid Olivia's invoice on his desk. "She's bold," he muttered. "Entitled. But Eleanor, what exactly do you want me to do about this?" "I want to make sure my assets are protected." I said firmly. Olivia assumes she's entitled to my savings. I need her to learn otherwise. So we began the paperwork, shifting my accounts, creating a trust, ensuring James was safeguarded. Next, I visited the bank. I set up a separate account, one Olivia didn't know about. Every cent of mine would be accounted for not as her future inheritance, but as my security. And then, I made one more visit, this time to a stationery store, a small one tucked on a side street with shelves of ivory envelopes and heavy cream paper. I bought the finest set I could find, because if Olivia wanted paper to define our relationship, then I would give her a document of my own. Meanwhile, family whispers began to stir. Margaret, my sister, called me one evening. "Eleanor, I don't like how Olivia's handling this. People are talking. She told Aunt Ruth that you're being difficult about finances." I clenched the phone tighter. "Difficult? For not writing her a blank check? She's painting you as stingy." Margaret sighed. "As though you're withholding for spite." It stung, but I let her words settle. Gossip could wound, yes, but gossip could also be redirected. I decided then that if Olivia was so concerned about appearances, appearances would be my weapon. The bridal shower incident had been humiliating, but it had also given me clarity. Olivia believed she held the power because she had the stage. She thought she could script my role: quiet mother, open wallet, no questions asked. But what she didn't realize was that every performance has an ending, and was writing the final act that the rehearsal dinner loomed. Olivia was frantic with details. Jonathan was half distracted, and his parents regarded me like a necessary inconvenience. At one point, Jonathan's mother, Patricia, leaned close to me as we arranged seating cards. Her perfume was sharp, expensive. "Eleanor, dear, I do hope you'll come through for Olivia. Weddings are stressful enough without financial complications." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. Sugar-wrap. I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I have a gift prepared for Olivia, one she'll never forget." Patricia's expression flickered curiosity, suspicion, but she said nothing more. The night before the wedding, I sat again at my kitchen table. The house was silent, the clock ticking steady. In front of me lay two envelopes, Olivia's invoice, and my carefully prepared countergift. The first was hers, demanding. The second was mine, deliberate. I traced my fingers over the smooth paper, feeling the weight of it tomorrow in front of her friends, and every guest she so desperately wanted to impress. Olivia would open my envelope, and she would learn that I was not the woman she thought I was. She thought she could humiliate me with numbers. But tomorrow, I would show her that not all gifts can be measured in dollars, and mine would cost her far more than she ever imagined. The morning of the wedding rehearsal dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself was holding its breath. I brewed my tea slowly, the faint scent of chamomile filling the kitchen. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the electric current of anticipation. On the counter sat the envelope, crisp ivory, sealed with care. Inside, not a check, not cash, but something sharper, the truth. I slipped it into my handbag and left for the church. The rehearsal was chaos, as rehearsals often are. Olivia flitted about like a queen bee, directing bridesmaids in blush dresses, snapping at the florist about centerpieces, fussing with Jonathan over vows. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She marched over, eyes glittering, voice low but sharp. "Mom, did you bring it?" I tilted my head. "Bring what?" Her nostrils flared. "Don't play games. The money. You've been stalling long enough." A few nearby bridesmaids paused their chatter, pretending not to listen. Jonathan's mother, Patricia, glanced over with thinly veiled interest. I lowered my voice, calm as still water. "You'll get your gift tomorrow, Olivia, in front of everyone. Isn't that what you wanted?" For the first time, her confidence wavered. A flicker of unease crossed her face, quickly masked by irritation. "Fine," she hissed, "but don't you dare embarrass me." Her words struck me like a spark, igniting something I hadn't realized before. She was nervous. She was afraid. It was small, barely visible beneath her polished exterior, but it was there. The first crack in her armor. And in that moment I realized I had the upper hand. That evening James came by. He'd taken time off from teaching to help where he could. Though Olivia mostly ignored his offers, he found me at the kitchen table again, staring at the envelope. "Mom," he said softly, "I can see it on your face. She's pushed you too far, hasn't she?" I looked at him, my steady boy with his kind eyes, and I felt a rush of guilt. "James, I don't want to cause a scene, but I also can't let her walk over me like this." She handed me a bill as though I were her servant. He nodded slowly. "Then don't fight her with shouting. Fight her with the truth. People need to see who she really is." I smiled faintly. "That's the plan." James leaned closer. "Mom, whatever you're going to do, I'll stand by you. Olivia might not see your worth, but I do." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away. His words were a balm, a reminder that love still existed in this family, even if it wasn't evenly distributed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of Olivia's voice. "Don't embarrass me." But hadn't she already embarrassed me? At the shower, in front of family and friends, by reducing me to a number on a bill. If embarrassment was her greatest fear, then perhaps that was the only way she'd learn. And yet, I didn't want to destroy her. She was still my daughter, my child, the baby I once rocked to sleep. What I wanted was not revenge for its own sake. I wanted a lesson, a reckoning, a chance for her to see what she had become. That was the line I walked that night. Between cruelty and justice. The next morning, sunlight broke through the heavy clouds, streaming gold across my curtains. I rose, steady now, my decision solid in my chest. I dressed carefully in a V-dress, pearls Daniel had given me on our 30th anniversary, sensible shoes. I looked in the mirror and saw not a woman to be pitied, but a mother ready to reclaim her dignity. As I slipped the envelope into my bag, I whispered to myself, today. She learned. She thought my silence meant surrender, but by the time she opened that envelope at her wedding, Olivia would realize silence can be the sharpest weapon of all. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp Olivia had dreamed of. The church bells rang out in bright tones, echoing across the manicured lawns. The air was thick with the scent of roses, thousands of them, shipped in overnight, arranged in towering vases that lined the aisles. Guests whispered admiration, their voices carrying like soft ripples across the sanctuary. I sat near the front, pearls cool against my skin, hands folded neatly in my lap. My handbag rested at my feet, the ivory envelope tucked inside like a coiled snake. Olivia swept down the aisle in her gown, layers of silk trailing behind her, the beaded bodice shimmering like starlight. She was radiant, yes, but there was something brittle in her smile. Perhaps even she knew beauty cannot disguise everything. The ceremony passed in a blur, vows recited, rings exchanged, applause swelling as they were pronounced husband and wife. Cameras flashed, organ pipes thundered, and yet, all I could think of was the moment to come, the reception. The ballroom was dripping with extravagance. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, reflecting off champagne glasses. The air was alive with the mingling scent of filet mignon and buttercream, the chatter of nearly 200 guests, the swell of a 12-piece orchestra tucked into a corner. At the head table, Olivia sat like royalty, Jonathan at her side. Patricia and her husband beamed with pride, casting glances down the rows as though displaying their daughter-in-law was their crowning achievement. I remained quiet, watching, waiting. Then came the moment the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, his voice carrying through the hall. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the gifts. The bride and groom would like to thank their families for their generous support. Polite applause filled the room. Olivia leaned forward, eyes glinting as she looked down the line of tables. She was waiting for me, expecting me to rise, envelope in hand, and announce my contribution like some dutiful servant. Slowly, I stood. The room quieted. I reached into my bag, drew out the ivory envelope, and walked toward the head table. My heels clicked against the polished floor, a measured rhythm that carried across the hall. I stopped before Olivia. Her face was radiant with expectation. "Mom," she said sweetly, microphone angled toward me. "Do you have something you'd like to share?" The silence was thick. Every eye was on us. Double quotes. "Yes," I replied, my voice calm, steady. "I do." I placed the envelope gently in front of her. Her manicured fingers snatched it eagerly, tearing it open in front of everyone. She expected a check. Instead, her smile faltered. Her eyes darted across the page, confusion replacing triumph. "What is this?" she whispered. The guests stirred, curious. "Read it aloud," I suggested softly. Her throat tightened. This isn't funny, Mom." Jonathan leaned over, brow furrowed. "Olivia, what does it say?" I turned to the microphone, my voice carrying clear and calm. "It's my countergift. Since my daughter presented me with an invoice for nearly $20,000, I thought it only right to respond in kind. This document outlines the support I've already provided from the moment she was born." Gasps rippled across the room. I continued, pulling a second copy from my bag for the audience to see. Hospital bills, school tuition, braces, dance lessons, first car, college tuition. Every sacrifice, every dollar I worked for so she could have a better life. The total far exceeds what she asked of me for this wedding. Olivia's face flushed crimson. "Mom, stop it." But I wasn't finished. "And," I said, holding the final page high, "it also includes a recent legal adjustment. My estate, which Olivia has long assumed she would inherit in full, has been placed into a trust. James will now share equally. No child of mine will be favored for their greed." A stunned silence fell. Forks froze mid-air. Patricia's eyes widened, her hand gripping her glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Jonathan's mouth opened, then closed, words failing him. Olivia's voice rose, shrill, desperate. "You can't do this. You're humiliating me in front of everyone." I looked her square in the eye. "You humiliated me first, Olivia, at your shower, when you reduced me to a wallet. Respect is a two-way street, and you chose to walk away from it. Today, I'm simply giving you directions back." The orchestra fell silent. The only sound was the quiet clicking of cameras capturing every frozen expression, every ounce of tension. Then, slowly, someone at the far table began to clap. Another joined, and another, until half the room was applauding, not loudly, not raucously, but firmly, a quiet endorsement of dignity reclaimed. Olivia crumpled the paper in her fist, tears streaking her carefully painted face. She pushed back her chair and stormed out, heels striking like gunfire against the marble floor. Jonathan sat stunned, unsure whether to follow or stay. His parents looked as though the earth had shifted beneath their feet. I returned to my seat, calm as ever, the weight lifted from my chest. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as a checkbook, not as an obligation, but as a woman who had given and finally drawn a line. Olivia thought the wedding would crown her triumph. Instead, it unveiled her greed, and as the applause swelled behind me, I realized the cost of my gift would echo far beyond that night. The applause of the reception faded into whispers, then silence, then the scraping of chairs as guests tried to decide whether to pretend nothing had happened or acknowledge the storm that had just passed. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap, feeling the steady beat of my heart. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't cursed, and yet the truth had cut sharper than any anger could. Olivia never returned to the reception. Word trickled back through bridesmaids she had locked herself in the bridal suite, sobbing, refusing to come out. Jonathan went after her eventually, but even from where I sat I could see the conflict on his face. He hadn't known about the invoice. His pride, too, had been pierced in front of 200 guests. The rest of the evening unfolded like a play where the lead actor had fled. Guests danced awkwardly, laughter too loud, glasses clinking with forced cheer, but no amount of champagne could disguise the fracture. And yet, in that fractured space, something remarkable happened. People approached me, quietly at first, aunt, a cousin, then a friend of Jonathan's family. They touched my hand, leaned in close, and whispered words like brave and you did the right thing. One older woman, Patricia's neighbor, even murmured, about time someone put her in her place. For years I had felt like I was shrinking, giving more than I received, bending until I feared I would break. That night, I realized I wasn't invisible. Others had seen, others had understood, and in reclaiming my voice, I hadn't just defended myself, I had spoken for every parent who'd ever been taken for granted in the days that followed. The fallout spread. Olivia called once, leaving a message sharp with rage. How could you do this to me? You ruined my wedding. But she didn't speak of respect. She didn't apologize. It was still only about appearances. I didn't call back. Jonathan, however, did. His voice was quiet, heavy. Mrs. Whitman, I didn't know she sent you an invoice. If I had, I would have stopped her. Sorry. There was sincerity in his words, but also uncertainty. Already he had seen a side of Olivia he couldn't unsee. As for Patricia, she sent me a letter, a neat, formal thing, typed and signed in ink. It said simply, we hope to maintain civility for the sake of appearances. Appearances. Always appearances. But I had no interest in civility built on silence. The real bomb came from James a few days later. He came to visit, bringing a bag of groceries and that warm smile of his. Mom, he said, putting the kettle on, I don't think you realize what you did. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You showed Olivia and everyone that love isn't measured in money. It's measured in respect, in gratitude, in the things no ledger can hold. I felt tears prick my eyes. Do you think she ever forgive me? He shrugged gently. That's her choice. But you didn't do this to hurt her. You did it to remind her who you are and who she should be. I sipped my tea, the steam rising soft and fragrant. His words settled in my chest like a weight, but not a heavy one, a grounding one. Weeks passed. Olivia didn't call again. I saw photos of her honeymoon on social media, smiling on a beach, clinking champagne glasses. For the world she still performed the role of perfection. But I knew the silence between us was more than distance. It was a wound. I don't regret my choice because sometimes love must be firm. Sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and teach another theirs is to step into the storm and hold your ground. For years, I feared losing my daughter's love, but I realized love without respect is not love at all, and in reclaiming my dignity, I gave myself a gift no one could ever take. Peace. But peace does not mean the story is over, for wounds left unattended have a way of reopening, and Olivia's silence was not the end of our war, but only the beginning of something deeper. The seasons turned. The roses in my garden bloomed and withered. The air shifted from the sweetness of spring to the bite of autumn. Life carried on, steady and unyielding, as it always does. Sometimes, in the still hours of the evening, I found myself wondering if Olivia replayed that moment in her mind, the envelope, the applause, the way her crown of entitlement slipped in front of everyone she wanted to impress. Perhaps she told herself I was cruel. Perhaps she convinced herself I loved James more. Or perhaps, in quiet moments she would never admit aloud, she felt the sting of truth. I do not know, and I may never know. What I do know is this: respect is not a gift to be demanded. It is earned, moment by moment, choice by choice. I raised a daughter who mistook my sacrifices for obligations, but I will not leave this world teaching her that lesson was acceptable. I chose dignity, and though it cost me the closeness of my child, I gained something rarer, clarity. Because sometimes, the cruelest invoice is not the one handed on paper. It is the bill life delivers when love is taken for granted, and my cat was simply making sure Olivia opened hers. She handed me a bill for her wedding, but in the end, I gave her the receipt for a lifetime.